All right, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to this Whole Life Action Hour. I am Ocean Robbins, your host. Thrilled to be with you today. Today, we're going to focus on how to be a positive plant-based influence in your community. We are here with Lianna Levine Reisner to talk about plant-based leadership and a little bit of context here. So we live in a toxic food culture. It can be hard to stay the course on a plant-based path when a lot of your friends and loved ones just don't seem to understand your choices, may even feel threatened or defensive when you make the choices that are best for you. So, how can you navigate family dynamics, social dynamics, stay true to your values, and also live in a way that uplifts connection and builds congruency with others? So, you have more love, not more alienation. So, in this action hour, we're going to talk about that. We're going to look at practical tips for eating differently in families, how to respond to naysayers and critics, how to successfully influence people without coming off as dogmatic or making them defensive, and strategies for how to positively impact your community. And we are here today with Lianna Reisner, who believes that food is often the best medicine for many of the major health concerns of our day. And she wants to make all communities healthier, safer, and stronger. She co-founded Plant Powered Metro New York, which is an initiative that helps introduce whole food, plant-based diets into vulnerable and urban communities. Lianna holds a certificate in plant-based nutrition from the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies and eCornell. She is a certified vegan lifestyle coach and educator through Main Street Vegan Academy. And she has a master's from Case Western Reserve University's Weatherhead School of Management. She is passionate about cultivating and supporting leaders to bring about positive change. Lianna, thrilled to be with you today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure and always so exciting to be part of community conversations with other people who care so deeply about these issues.
Wonderful. So, Plant-Based Metro New York, I just want to start there because there's a lot happening in New York right now around food. Can you tell us a little bit about your mission and what you're up to right now?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've been in the spotlight, I guess, mostly because of New York City Mayor Adams, who has been really an evangelist in the best possible ways for getting healthy food out there through plant-based defaults in the hospital menus, school food with the new Plant Powered Fridays initiative. And they're doing many other things that actually bring lifestyle medicine into local hospitals to train more physicians, et cetera. We are the folks on the ground in the community who are, average people, let's say. I'm just one gal who happened to learn about plant-based nutrition and got excited and teamed up with other people. And what we're doing is trying to create the response on the ground from community members. And the way that we do that is we bring people in who are already passionate about plant-based nutrition, figure out what their talents and skills are, and give them venues and outlets where they can go and put their skills to good use for the movement. What does that mean? Well, we do all sorts of educational programming. We do outreach at health fairs and festivals. We work hand in hand with our healthcare professionals to do education that really speaks to their expertise while also centering people who are culinary experts or, just parents or people who have gone through certain illnesses and bringing their stories into community spaces, community centers, churches, other wellness communities, hospitals. And what's been really exciting is that we've been finding so much receptivity among certain kinds of community organizations and certainly in healthcare locally, where the leaders of these institutions know that they need to do better with food and they want to bring education into their communities. And here we are, we're really the only organization that's teaching about plant-based nutrition on the ground. So we get out there and we will put our people into action in service to that.
So important. And, I'm curious if you can give us a little dispatch. I mean, just recently, as we're doing this interview, a conference of mayors convened and mayors of 1,400 cities passed a resolution together, essentially supporting more plant-based food advocacy following the model of what New York City's been doing. So New York really is a trailblazer on this. And with implementing plant-first options in hospitals so that people get plant-based options and they can choose to get not plant-based if that's what they want. But the default menu isn't, oh, if you're vegan, you get the special menu. No, the special menu is different, but the main plant-based thing is where you start. Getting obviously now 2 meatless days in schools, and so much else. There's hope that this will reduce the city's climate impact. There's hope that this will bring down costs of medical care in the city of New York, and of course improve the health of the population. Are you seeing a lot of pushback? Are kids like getting mad and not eating the meals in the schools? Are patients getting frustrated in hospitals, or is it kind of working so far? What's the early signs of the response in the community to this?
Yeah, great question. Things are working in certain ways, and in other ways, we need more education. Because while you can push all sorts of initiatives from the top, if the people on the receiving end don't really understand the whys or don't want to, accept the whys, then it's hard to pull it forward. So yeah, in practice, there has been difficulty, let's say, in rolling out the plant-based meals in schools. First, because not all the schools are equipped to offer meals that are, either scratch cooked or that are ready to heat up and serve and make them look appetizing and ready for the kids, because it's a little different from what you might do with chicken nuggets and mozzarella sticks. And I think
Right.
that with this idea that we need to bring more healthy plants into schools, some people just really care that kids have calories, that they're able to show up, get the meals that they get at school. Some kids, of course, only get that meal, and they might not have it if they were at home. So it's
Right.
really become this wider issue. And even some parents with privilege are coming forward and saying, well, we need to make sure that there's animal protein in their meals. And these are just instances where the pushback is the same on the wider level that it is on our family to family level or with our friend
Right.
group,
Right. Right.
without the initiatives that will help to bring people in alignment with these incredible action steps from the political space. It does have there are instances in which things will push back. However, I'll give you one example. There are now senior centers across New York City will be required starting last month to offer a plant-based meal once a week. And what's interesting about that is, again, their folks don't necessarily know how to cook a meal or to work with a vendor to provide a meal
Hmm.
that the seniors will appreciate. And so what do? Well, they're looking at training. They're looking at how do we teach our chefs how to cook differently. And so what we're trying to do is, bring the people who are in our network forward to educate, because while people are interested, it's like, the devil's in the details, and that's where we want to help move things forward, getting people to know more about the why and more about the practical implementation of all of this to make it easier for acceptance.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, let's get a little more into the personal side of things. When someone wants to be a plant-based eater, one of the challenges they're likely to face is social tensions. Um, what do you think are some of the key things to bear in mind if someone is eating differently than a spouse or kids or other people they live with or are close to?
Yeah, great question. So I think a lot of us feel called to change people because we have information that is transformative, right? We want our loved ones to thrive. We don't want to see them suffer. But sometimes starting at home with the people who we love, with our family, isn't a popular path. And that can really create tension, as you mentioned. So we talk a lot in what we do at Planned Powered Metro New York about how important it is to model healthy eating and to live it to the fullest as we can, but not to push too hard on other people until they're ready. And in our Jumpstart programs, where we help people transition fully into plant-based nutrition, whole food, we teach about how to navigate these multi-diet households. And so there are a lot of different strategies. Some of that is, creating zones in your home where you can have food that's for you and other places that are for your family members, so that you feel like you have safety in your spaces. Also stepping forward to advocate for what you need and setting limits, like, okay, I'm going to make the food, but I'm only going to make the things that I want to have present in my home, and otherwise you have to make those things. To create also family meals with choice, taco bars, potato bars, pasta bars, bringing up
Mm.
the options so that people can choose to incorporate more plants, but they might keep those beloved foods that they have, in their dishes. And in general, we are able to generally improve the health quotient of the meals. I talk about that a lot, where, even if it's not a perfect meal, if it's not fully plant-based, or if it has too much of a processed food in it, we can still up the game by bringing in awareness of the ingredients that are going to be healthier and bring that into our homes. So for me, I was lucky. My husband started out as vegetarian and he was really receptive to whole food, plant-based eating. And my kids were young, so we were making decisions for them and we set the boundaries for them. But, there are families, who are they might be plant forward. They're still skeptical about the choices that any of us may make. And for people like me who have children, sometimes it's the grandparents who are questioning why they're not having dairy or why they're being deprived of certain things. And I think we just have to feel resolve a little bit in our facts, communicate what makes sense to communicate, and sometimes to just keep quiet when it doesn't make sense to push it too far.
Yeah, thank you. There is a word, orthorexia, that refers to somebody who is compulsively obsessed with food, typically with healthy food, and it's can be linked to anorexia. It's some people maybe are scared of food, but at the same time, I think that some people are seen that way by others because it seems like they're just obsessed with things that other folks think is not material. But to that person, it's about conscience and integrity and values. How do you think about that term and the sort of cultural stigma against being too fussy about food? And what is the place for fussiness is just basic integrity versus fussiness is neurotic? How do you know the
Yeah, that is
difference?
such a great question. And I know Dr. Greger did a great video about this on nutritionfacts.org. But there's something about the whole eating disorders conversation that I think we have to be honest about. There are people who struggle, and even if it's not a full-on eating disorder, but it's disordered eating, some of this may play into that. At the same time, if the choices that we make feel good in our body, and if they don't necessarily create a problem for other people, like some you might say, oh, it's a problem because now I make my mother-in-law cook this way on Thanksgiving when she wouldn't have otherwise. That's not really a problem. That's just an inconvenience. But if it's not a problem for other people, then I think the idea of orthorexia is probably overplayed in certain ways. And it really does come down, as you said, to the question of values. Well, I value my health. I value my ability to buck my genes so that I
Hmm.
don't fall into the same cancer trap that my family has. And if I'm going to do that, then I'm going to be on this path, and I don't want people to take me off of it. I think that until we have a paradigm shift among folks who might be among the naysayers, it's going to be harder to just walk that path and not be labeled in a certain way.
Yeah.
But again, if we have confidence, if we bring positivity and a spirit of love and compassion into our conversations with others, then maybe those kinds of labels will be less liberally used for those of us who make these decisions.
Yeah. Thank you. Um, a lot of people in our audience have loved ones who are suffering right now from heart disease or cancer or type 2 diabetes or excess weight or inflammation or other conditions that might be responsive to a healthier diet and lifestyle. And a lot of us may feel frustrated that some of the people we love the most might not do all that we wish they would do to optimize their diet and lifestyle, and that this could lead to major suffering down the road. And in some cases, if it's a spouse or a child or someone very close to us or a parent, we may actually end up footing the bill, so to speak, literally or figuratively, taking care of somebody who's suffering. So it impacts us too. But sometimes when we raise issues of diet and lifestyle, loved ones don't always respond the way we wish they would. So, do you have any tips for how to influence loved ones, particularly loved ones who we might be concerned about if they continue on their current path?
Yes, this is loaded. There's so much to say about it. I think, first of all, people need to want this lifestyle. People need to want it. They need a motivator. Whether their disease is their motivator, we can't We can't decide that. We can't just say, oh, there's urgency, you need this, and then suddenly click, like they're there with us. It doesn't work like that. Um, I think our loved ones in those circumstances are often curious. They're interested in other solutions. They're interested in trying things out, tasting, but they may not be ready to go all in. And I think, we can't push. But if somebody really does have a serious diagnosis and we're observing, we're witness to their suffering, I know we all feel this ethical call to say something because we have information that we know could save somebody's life, and
Hmm.
withholding it feels wrong. I remember when I first learned about plant-based nutrition, it was probably within the first few months of being exposed to it. I knew of a contact who decided to have elective stomach removal because he had stomach cancer in his family and he wanted to avoid it after witnessing his aunt die a terrible death from stomach cancer. And it was at this point where I had just learned about plant-based nutrition. I just learned about the correlation between stomach cancer and salt consumption. And I really wanted to say something and I didn't do it because I didn't feel confident enough in what I had learned. And to this day, I have deep regret that I didn't say anything because he was somebody far enough removed from me that if I had offered information and then stepped away because I wasn't a close friend or contact, maybe he would have done something with it. But with people who are closer to us, we have to sort of massage that relationship a lot more. And so all of this goes back to the idea of empathy. And I think when we talk about empathy, the idea is, we want to come into our relationships um, with an open vessel in a way. It's like, I'm here to be with you, to see what you're feeling and emoting, and to just be present with you. And so if we come into this place of wanting to influence people without empathy,
Hmm.
we've there's no way influence can happen, right?
Right,
I
right.
think influence follows naturally when people feel loved and trusted and heard by us.
Yeah.
So at Plant Powered Metro New York, when we teach our mentors, who are peer guides for folks who are new or struggling with plant-based nutrition, we tell the mentors that there's a 3-step process to offering an empathic response. The first is to validate what you hear. I'm so sorry to hear that you've been so uncomfortable, or that you had such overwhelming news from the doctor, or this decision the decision to go on another medication is causing you distress. Um, then we can ask permission to share our thoughts and our ideas. May I offer some information about what I've been learning about food? And
Yeah.
maybe it could help alongside whatever your doctor is suggesting, right? So asking for permission, but only when they say yes, that's when we share, right? And so sometimes we just need to be with people, listen, hold the relationship. And when it feels like maybe there's an opening, we try to open the door.
Yeah.
And then another key, right? Another key for empathy is using I statements too, where I've learned this, I've heard that, not you should or you have to do this. It's so urgent. You really can't do it this way anymore. If we don't have positive patterns of discussion with family members already, it's going to be harder to open into these empathic conversations.
Hmm.
And so we need to start practicing empathy now, even before there are issues,
Yeah.
and hopefully allowing those positive relationships to sort of give us more of the social capital we need going forward. The other thing, just one last thing I'll say about this, Ocean, is that another tip for talking to loved ones is not to go down the rabbit hole on individual data points or studies
Hmm.
or a single person's health story, because people can pick those apart. And then you've sort of missed offering your family member the bigger picture idea that can draw them into the next idea and the next.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't like want to come up with the 8 top things that they should know and pepper them with a big email with all of that. You know, just to give them a big idea, like how we have often seen this analogy between smoking in its day and plant-based nutrition today, where, there's something about the social movement of things that has to shift. And I think that sometimes we dilute the argument when we go too deep into the finer details too soon.
Hmm.
So if we can offer 1 or 2 cogent ideas, then it's easier for our loved ones to take it in and to understand it.
Yeah. Awesome. So much wisdom in there. I think that sometimes I look at it as I want to be an ally to what somebody wants for their life. So when we understand what their passions, dreams, fears are, we can help them navigate with permission, of course.
That's right.
I think
That's right.
your suggestion around asking, is it okay at a certain point in the conversation, would you like to hear this from me? And if they say no, then listen to them, like, and if you're really curious, like, is it okay if I ask you again some future time? I hear you're a no right now. Would you be open to that? And if they're like, no, not ever, you're like, okay, well, I can't promise I won't ever ask again if it's okay to ask about asking, but I hear you,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah. And
honoring
here's the
people.
thing. They may also say yes because they think that you want them to say yes.
Yeah,
And so I think if they open the door, we sort of need to say something that's not on the soapbox. I
right.
think the key is get off the darn soapbox,
Yeah,
because the soapbox is the place where you are elevated. You're putting yourself on a pedestal. And
right.
we want to talk eye to eye to people.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
you know, being
yeah.
gentle really matters.
There's also a difference between a yes that's like you can feel that they're a yes, and a yes that's like, yeah, sure, whatever. You're gonna do your
Yep,
thing, so I'll deal. With an eye
that's
roll.
right.
If you get that, that's not a yes. I'd say, you
Yep.
know what, you said yes, but I'm not really feeling it, and I don't want to shove anything down your throat. Um, I so anyway, great stuff there. I think one other piece I'm curious your take on is like for somebody who's a caretaker or expects to be a caretaker, or that if your partner gets sick and you're going to be the one who's taking care of them, or you're going to lose your beloved too soon, like that you have skin in the game for what they
Yes.
do, right? And so I think there's an interesting tension point there because, of course, everyone is sovereign for their choices. And just because they impact other people doesn't mean they don't get the right to make their own choices, right? But at the
Yeah.
same time, you get more say in the matter, I think, if you're impacted. So what's the place to say, hey, like an I statement, which you referred to, what's the place to say, hey, I'm concerned about you or what's going to happen here because I don't want to lose you or because I don't want to have to take care of you for the rest of your life or whatever it is. Like, I want my partner, I want my mom, or, whatever it is. Like, do you think
Yes.
there's a spot where that's appropriate? And is there a slippery slope there that we need to be aware of?
I think there is. And I think, oh, there's so much to this. Yes, if you are the person who's responsible for, the general day-to-day workings of somebody else's life and they're struggling, it feels like having that honest conversation, being vulnerable with them, as you just said, the I statements, that is obviously the right thing to do. And now whether they take it or not is their choice. But if if there's a third party where it's like the spouse of or a home health aide or somebody like that is actually making meals and making decisions for the other person, I think that's a reason for more open confrontation, let's call it. Um, but I would still want to do it in a way that helps them to recognize that we're not blaming that person for anything that they may have done before that may have negatively impacted the loved one, right?
Yeah.
We're just trying to offer another path and to see how it might work. So on an experimental level, why don't we try this out and I can help you? And, you know, so I think there are ways to bring that up for sure.
Got it. Thank you. Shifting topics here. Right now, statistically, the most economically disadvantaged populations are the most likely to depend for the majority of their calories on foods that are linked to increased risk of chronic disease. They're the most likely to suffer and die from preventable chronic illnesses. And these are the communities that can least afford those costs. Can you tell us about some of the steps you've taken to positively impact health and well being in historically marginalized communities?
Absolutely. This is a really interesting conversation because there are different levels of need in communities. You have folks who really truly rely on the safety net and on a safety net food system. And really, the only way that we can improve their food is to educate, to train the people who feed them, who make procurement decisions, the decision makers, what might be at food pantries, at churches, at the large safety net nonprofits, at the chefs in the kitchens. And this is an area where at Plant Powered Metro New York, we've been really interested in teaching these influencers, but we haven't yet done that good work yet. What we have done so far with more, like, let's say, the average lower income community member, we take a few approaches. first, which I think is really important, is that we bring honest education to them. Because you might think, oh, people are struggling. They really just need like the baby steps approach. A little bit of this and a little bit of that will help. And honestly, we teach people, no matter their socioeconomic background, the same nutritional principles that we teach everyone else, because we think that watering it down does a disservice to them.
Mm-hmm.
And, we may need to change the literacy level of what we're teaching. We're always thinking about the cultural relevance of the food demonstrations, the recipes we provide. We focus on more budget-friendly ways of preparing meals, but otherwise the general information is the same. And the key here is to bring the what I call the lens of empowerment. We're all about health empowerment. To be empowered, you have to have the tools and these glasses that you can wear as you go about your life in your community, and to see both the challenges and the opportunities. So when they come out of our classes or programs and they're starting to see their food environment, they're able to honestly sometimes see healthy options that they had never seen before. When you go into your dollar store or your bodega, you're not looking for the good stuff necessarily, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had a member of our Jumpstart program who said, I never would have thought that I would find beans and rice at my dollar store, but there they were.
Mm-hmm.
I had never seen them before. Low sodium beans, like it's a crazy thing.
Yeah.
And so, we have a lot of conversation at the national level about how, we need to do better with food deserts. In the New York area, there are definitely neighborhoods that don't have the access that they need. But the pandemic actually has made it easier for people to find and access quality produce than I think ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And now, we just need to equip people with the decision-making process. Not that that's the only thing. Obviously, there's a whole other ball of wax to figure out. But I also feel that when we're in our programs, for us, the currency of exchange is relationships. And that's why we teach empathy, we teach compassion. And in our Jumpstarts, for example, we're creating space for people who may have similar health concerns and who may have similar cultural identities to be mentored together and to find solutions with each other. So when they're in groups and they're able to think, on a problem solving kind of basis, I'm not going to be able to access this or that ingredient, or, this week's tough. I'm running out of cash until the next infusion. That's where we get the kinds of problem solving I think that we need to help folks get over the hurdles of day-to-day life. And there's no quick solution, but honesty and having a new lens, I think, really changes the equation for all people, regardless of their socioeconomic background.
Thank you. Well, those are some wonderful tips and context, and sort of at a tactical level, you all are offering classes for how do you recruit, how do you pull people in, where do you offer them, what are some of the other steps you're taking to build a platform, if you will, for your message?
Yeah, well, we have always said at Plant Powered Metro New York that we really want to work at the community level, which means we go to community organizations to build relationships and set up educational partnerships. So
Mm-hmm.
we have worked with different faith-based communities, and as we bring new people into our programming, they're always opening doors for new relationships. So one example is we recently did a program at a local church, a Black church, where the experience of chronic illness was pretty rampant. And we were able to offer a grant-funded seminar to them, like a 4-hour program with a meal included, all about plant-based nutrition from start to finish, with the tasting included. And this is where we try to harness resources from the outside. So, private funding to be able to bring really meaningful, experiential educational programming into communities. And then also to find, sponsors from within too, because you never know. Sometimes we don't have to pay for the food bill because there are folks who work in the kitchen and they'd love to put together the meal. We just have to give them a little training on it.
Yeah.
So working with community partners is the biggest piece,
Mm-hmm.
and to go from relationship to relationship. So again, we're building ambassadors as one person finishes a jumpstart or finishes of we use PCRM's Food for Life classes as one format of the
Hmm.
programs that we offer with local instructors, and they open doors. So we might be working at a community center in East Harlem, and then some folks there actually live in the nearby building that's a tenant has a tenant association, and so
Hmm.
they're hosting the next programming, and it becomes to me, this is about building community capital for the excitement, and we're able to do that with these kinds of relationships.
That's so powerful. I think that anytime we want to positively influence a community, start by getting to know the community and seeing what are the nodes that have already, the teams, the projects that have already built trust. And how do you connect with them and let those be the doorway in, whether it's, as you're saying, the church groups or all the other groups. You don't have to start a new group. You get to
Yes.
partner with the groups that are already on the ground working with people dealing with the real issues. And in some ways this is the same principle you're describing with your spouse or your loved one or your friend. It's like, get to know them, ask questions, get curious, find out what their values are, what their needs are, and then see how you can help them better accomplish their goals. And so anyway, just wanted to say that feels like a through line that's quite powerful, I think. Now, for those of our participants who feel like they want to do something to positively impact the wellness of people in their community, do you have any other suggestions for ways they might want to get started, steps they might want to take, resources to turn to? Can they go to you all and find out how to use your principles in their community? Or do you have any tips for how to get started?
Yeah, great question. Definitely, if anybody's in the New York area, you're welcome to come in and join our network of change agents. We do training, we teach people how to do outreach effectively. We just have been talking about how to build community partnerships just like this. We train our mentors. And I would love to help other people in other communities do that as well. But for bandwidth, it's not always easy to lift out of our local work to do the kind of support and consulting work that may be needed elsewhere. But it's across North America, there are many other local organizations and groups that do exist. Perhaps not as big as Plant Powered Metro New York. Many of them have been affiliated with the Plant Pure Communities Pod Network, which is soon transferring to the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, but that's new news. And so for those of us groups who are independently affiliated, you can find other both incorporated organizations that may have nonprofit status or not, and others that are just groups of people making a difference, and team up with them. And I also think, though, a Google search might bring you some interesting ideas for sure. But our own entrepreneurship is perhaps the most powerful thing. So, you may, again, be a part of a community or have a friend of a friend who's works at a clinic or has a relationship with a community center. And I think the idea that we can each create our own initiatives, they don't have to be big. They can be, small educational programs. You could build a partnership and team up with a local lifestyle medicine healthcare professional or plant-based nutrition chef. And just two people can do quite a lot together. This is also, when we talk about empowerment, we don't talk about it just for what happens in community. It's what happens to ourselves. And I think sometimes we judge ourselves too much, or we may not know exactly what to do to get something going. But having a team, having people to help you put it into action is key. And maybe it's, you and a sibling who are both doing this together in your community. Make it a family affair if it's just the two of you and you don't know anybody else.
Fabulous. Thank you. I want to turn now to some of the questions we've received from Whole Life Club members that they asked me to ask you about. So Deborah asked, how can we make positive changes in school lunch menus? She said the districts contract with corporate vendors that have mostly processed foods, Pop-Tarts, sugary cereal, corn dogs, sausage on a stick, chicken nuggets, cow milk, etc., with one veggie or fruit per lunch. What can we do about this?
Yeah, I mean, this is big. So here's what I would do first. There's a bit of power mapping that I think is important. We have to know who the decision makers are in these systems. Is there a nutrition services team? Or, do they have a dietitian on staff? Or is it just, some administrators who are making choices? It's probably going to differ very widely from community to community. And the key is these folks need to have to want change. They need a motivator. So some kind of educational work at the administrative levels is going to be needed. But then, of course, the demand also needs to come from the bottom up. Parents need to ask for change. Teachers need to ask for change. And even if there aren't parents in the community who, like, they may not care about plant-based nutrition, but maybe they do care that their kids get more colorful foods on the menu, or that they're being encouraged to choose, certain foods over others.
Hmm.
That's power. And I think finding those allies is always going to be key. Um, but ultimately, to make procurement changes, to seek new vendors, that's a bigger project. And I think probably the best resource out there that I can point to are, for example, the Coalition for Healthy School Food, which has been working in New York City and in other communities, and could at least
Hmm.
coach folks on the issues and the talking points so that you can figure out where to go in your own community. And then there are other interesting things to bring in here, not just about nutrition, but for example, Sodexo, which is one of the big food service companies working across the country. They made an announcement that they're transitioning to more plant-based options for climate reasons.
Wow.
And so, obviously in each community there's going to be different motivators, but if you live in a community where maybe they're more interested in climate change and the environmental arguments than in health, that may be an opening too. See, to give examples of players in the food system who are making change and why, to open the conversation.
Yes, thank you. Um, Lynn said, when I'm out socially and the menu is limited, and I order something like a couple sides for my dinner, like sweet potato and broccoli, I'm inevitably asked why. I'd love a simple response that doesn't put people to sleep. Typically, I say it's for health reasons primarily, but also environmental and animal welfare. The problem is there are plenty of people who want to argue, as they believe you need animal protein or dairy to be healthy. I often feel on the defensive, and I'm trying to learn how to joyfully express the delights and benefits of whole food plant based eating in a way that inspires people to learn more. We've already talked about this some, but do you have anything more you'd say for Lynn?
Yeah, so this is another thing we talk about in our programming, which is, what's your why? Why are you actually doing this? And we may have a lot of different reasons, but the why can be very inspirational. So we don't have to sort of fall back on, oh, it's for health reasons, which is very neutral. It might be, I want to eat in a way that gives me a better chance of enjoying my grandchildren as I age. Or for me, I would say I'm doing this to reduce my cancer risk because my family has been really very affected by it. And I just don't want to go through the trauma. And so if I leave it at that one statement that's a
Mm-hmm.
bit powerful,
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying less and it's actually opening the door for
And
questions.
they can say, "Tell me more." Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right. So
Yeah.
so and then, you can answer questions calmly and, like, don't give too much, right? The whole soapbox
Mhm.
idea of just like getting on your tirade and getting it out, it does not work. So say things calmly, but say them with confidence. And I think the key is that, we may want to we really have to be schooled in what the science is so that we can be ready to answer questions. And this is, I think, a piece of the whole empowerment equation. If we have some of the key answers that are needed, we need to have them at the ready to practice. I like to practice in the mirror and just, like, get it out, because sometimes we're not quick on our feet, and having it ready is important. But
Yeah.
the other thing I'll say is I think it's also really important not to throw around the names of our gurus in the field. We all love, we know who they are.
Uh-huh.
They've written the books, they've done the movies, but it does make it sound like we're part of a cult. And I think if we can
Mm.
um, make the conversation less about the gurus and more about the why and the what, it's a little easier to help people see us as not part of a cult.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, there's that old joke about, like, how do you know if someone's a vegan? Oh, they'll tell you. You know,
Yep.
because people can just, like, launch into the tirades or the cult-like thing of, like, all the gurus, as you say, and yeah, it's even to, like, say, "I read a book that really inspired me," and don't say who wrote it, unless they ask, right? Because you don't otherwise it just feels too fundamentalist, like, ideology, and we wanna let people get curious if they are. And
Exactly.
if they're not, then
Exactly.
then it was an idle question. How about this, though? What do you think about the fact that some people are feeling guilty themselves deep down. A recent survey found that a third of the food that all Americans eat makes them feel guilty.
Mm.
Living with guilt, whether it's guilt about the climate, guilt about animals. Everyone knows animals are killed for meat. No one likes factory farms. But, we learn to deal with this. And a lot of people are eating their French fries or whatever it may be. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm giving myself a heart attack someday. But, I'm trying to cope. I'm trying to survive. So there's layers of shame and guilt and coping and denial that can be really tender for a lot of people if it gets poked. And so I think that's another piece to be aware of, isn't it? Is that we don't want to make people feel like they're being attacked or criticized or blamed or shamed for their suffering or for their fear. We want to have a lot of compassion and empathy and hopefully create a space where their natural desire to live in a good way, to take care of their bodies, to live in right relation with the earth, to be a part of the solution on our planet, like that can be evoked if that's what they want, rather than feeling like they're being shamed even more, because we don't need more shaming in the world.
Absolutely. And what I've been saying about that is it is fine for us to blame the systems around us, right? I think it's easier for us to say, look, society doesn't make it easy for us to make choice at all. Some things that may seem to be choices are actually not, because we are all dependent on foods that are killing us.
Yeah.
And so I always go back to the ideas of the pleasure trap that Dr. Goldhammer and Dr. Lyle wrote about, with the idea that we have these physiological evolutionary dependencies on the foods that are around us, and it's not really our fault at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can take, help people through our language take the blame off of themselves and recognize the challenges around them, it doesn't absolve them of action. We have this
Mm-hmm.
phrase in Jewish tradition that, you know, we shouldn't abstain from the work even if we can't finish it. We have to
Mm-hmm.
all be a part of it. Um, I think it helps us to feel better about our capacity to navigate the challenges when we know that not everything is in our hands. So,
Yeah.
but it also makes the case for, helping people to recognize that those even exist at all, because
Yeah.
nobody knows why French fries are calling to them, but they are.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Kimberly said, I love this topic. I live in the middle of Montana, very rural. Everyone pretty much cooks from scratch, lots of beef, potatoes, and baked desserts. Better than eating processed food. They have a very strong criticism about me choosing whole food plant-based. Are there any other ways besides Facebook, or just any ways, period, she's really asking, to find people in your area who would like to get together and share recipes and food?
Yeah, great question. I similar to what I said before, there are some of these local groups around, and if anybody is having any trouble, finding them or accessing them, I'm always happy to see what I can find through our networks and put you in touch with people. So you can share my email address, Ocean, in the notes.
Okay, or do you want to just share it here in case
Yeah,
people... Yeah.
sure. It's Lianna, Lianna, at ppmny.org, which stands for Plant Powered Metro New York, ppmny.org. So I think it's tough. And, I won't pretend that I know what it's like to live in a rural community. I did grow up as a child living in more rural places and then suburban. And I think that sometimes we in the cities perhaps oversimplify how accessible and this whole food plant-based lifestyle is, because we have
Mm-hmm.
access to a lot of people and ideas and food and services. So I think we have to be honest with our rural folks that the challenges are more real. But again, if there's even one person who can be there alongside you, or even if they're not fully whole food plant-based, but plant forward and
Mm-hmm.
curious, um, let that relationship, glide you into others. I think that's the whole key, is to build relationships that where it's a starting place, and things will grow and snowball from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I can imagine that if you can find any restaurant or natural food store in the greater area that's gonna be a bit of a magnet for certain kinds of eaters, that could be a reference point. And I realize that may not exist in rural Montana, depending on where you are, but there are more and more of these little nodes of opportunity, and those can sometimes be hubs for finding people. If you talk to folks who work there and you ask them if they know of any networks, or, it doesn't take a lot. If a few friends can change your whole experience from isolation to connection. So yeah, it's about finding some of those people. Um, Judy said, "How can I help bring vegan restaurants to my small town in Elmhurst, Illinois?" Other
Yeah.
than starting one, any other
Right.
thoughts? I don't know. I think you pretty much start one or something, right? Any other ideas there?
Yeah, I honestly, restaurants aren't going to open until there's a market for them. So
Right.
I think we have to do the hard work of building the market. But it could be as simple as maybe it's not a restaurant. Maybe you just need somebody who makes food. So find somebody and teach them how to cook the way you want to
Mm,
eat and give them your business, right?
yeah.
We can start to finance it on a very small scale. We don't need a full-on restaurant with a storefront to do that. And then maybe pull in more people to get them to order. And suddenly you've got an ecosystem that makes sense economically for the small business owner.
One other tip, some restaurants have a vegan menu or a gluten-free menu or a vegan and gluten-free menu, which is like a subset of their menu that's for that population, right? For the people who want to know exactly what they can eat if they're in that group. And so one thing you could do with a restaurant that doesn't have that maybe has a couple dishes or whatever that fit those criteria, would be to suggest it. Um, and maybe to suggest that they add a few more. Say, hey, I'd come here more, and I know some of my friends would as well if you had more vegan options, and maybe even a little vegan menu. Like, you can make suggestions like that, and then once that happens, it can kind of snowball, and that becomes a bit of a hub in the community. And then if they do that, try to get the local paper to do an article on it. You know, a positive story about a restaurant that's diverse, reaching diverse audiences, or whatever it is, right? Or why did they do that? Try to get them some positive press. Those are things that can be helpful. And then again, back to like local organizations, whatever the local organizations are, see if you can tap into them and see if they can be helpful. Again, churches can be really powerful, as you were mentioning, I think. But there are other kinds of community organizations, senior centers, different whatever it is in your area. What are the places where people congregate, and what are they congregating around? And is there any way to bring food consciousness in there, and then to sort of perhaps even make an announcement like, I just want to say, if anybody is thinking of starting a restaurant, I'd love one that does this. You can say stuff like that, and who knows what ripples that'll create. Beverly said, any suggestions for church groups? The food culture is so unhealthy, and then they're often praying for the sick members. I'm all for prayer, but eating healthy to prevent disease seems like a no-brainer to me. Help on my attitude would be welcome too. Any thoughts for
Hmm.
Beverly in working with a church?
Yeah. So first of all, I don't know what to say about your attitude. You sound like you have a great attitude. But I think there are lots of different ways to approach this through churches. Some churches have health ministries. Certainly within the Seventh-day Adventist community, those exist, and in other places as well. And if there isn't one, maybe there could be an interest in creating one. Um, I think there's also something about like our relationships with the clergy folks in our communities. It may help to have a heart to heart with your pastor, with your priest, or another clergy person in the community. They're often the ones who are dealing with people's illness firsthand through their pastoral care. And it can actually wear them down over time. They need resources, they need something. So I say, like, open the conversation privately with a member of your clergy, and then figure out how to move the conversation forward with them. There's also more grassrootsy kinds of ways to do it. You can create a club, a health is wealth club, a book group, some other a cooking group. And I think often our religious communities are excited to have programming going on. So even if it has a plant-based flair, maybe you'd find a few people who'd come and learn how to do something with you. And you could also get involved in programming committees. You could offer to organize a presentation with a local doctor for the community, and work in the kitchen. Like in some, I know in one of my synagogues in previous community that I lived in, people got together every Thursday night to prepare the meal for the Sabbath. And who was making the recipes? They were making decisions. So if you can get vegan entrees onto that menu, then you've got options for people, even if the whole menu isn't, fully healthy. I think there's a lot, just because churches, faith-based communities are all about relationships.
Yeah.
There's so much opportunity there.
Beautiful. Thank you. Lianna, this has been a fascinating conversation, hopefully useful for a lot of folks. I just want to so appreciate um, your holistic approach to relationship building, community healing, and ultimately creating wellness, not just in New York, but in all of our lives. Your leadership and your initiative and your innovations are kind of a template for so many of us to learn from. And I'm just so grateful for your work and for your wisdom and for sharing it all with us today.
Thank you, Ocean. I truly appreciate all these questions. And I know everybody, comes from a place of care in all of this work, and to figure out how to show that care in a way that others will really receive it. That's the holy grail for us. So I really wish everyone well in taking these ideas forward in your communities.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. All right. Have a beautiful day. Blessings. When it comes to cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic illness, what really matters isn't how many books you read, how many webinars you attend, or how much you know. What really matters at the end of the day is what you eat and how you live. The science has given us what we need to know. Now it's time for action. It's time to implement and optimize your healthy lifestyle. It's time to get results. It's time to say goodbye to confusion and hello to clarity. It's time to say goodbye to bad habits and hello to good ones. It's time to fall in love with foods that love you back. It's time to join a community that will support you in achieving your goals. It's time for Whole Life Club.